This video is sponsored by Delete Me.
Earlier this week, I woke up to a news story from Reuters that said that BlackBerry was contemplating a reorganization of its business.
Now, if you watched my last episode of When Phones Were Fun, you know that BlackBerry hasn't made a smartphone since 2015, when it pivoted to security solutions and car software. But it's amazing how many people haven't noticed. Every other reply to this tweet is a jab at the company for a handset business it hasn't operated in 8 years. And these misunderstandings are common. They happen to many more companies than just BlackBerry.
So today on Mr. Mobile, while we wait for a few new folding phones to make their way to my review desk, let's talk about a few companies that aren't what you think.
We've talked about licensing on the channel before, back when OnePlus announced the $150 million partnership it struck with camera company Hasselblad. This is a kind of co-branding that's been interrogated enough that nowadays I think most people get it. It's still a OnePlus or an Oppo phone, but Hasselblad has contributed its expertise to the process of tuning the camera. The same deal with Xiaomi and its even tighter partnership with Leica, which is said to extend even to lens selection on the hardware. And if you want to take it to the max, you can take a look at the Lights phone, which is actually made by Sharp, but of course co-designed and branded by Leica. If you turn back the clock a few years, the mobile landscape was littered with licensing that was and is easy to spot. Like Disney offered its own mobile phone service back in the day, and so did ESPN, but most folks knew they weren't buying a phone from Mickey or Boomer Esiason or whoever. These companies were buying space on a bigger company's network, in this case Sprint, and rebadging phones to deliver a specific branded experience. Sometimes the branding even went both ways. Samsung and Warner Brothers co-designed a cell phone for the second Matrix movie that was also sold in stores. See previous episode. Other partnerships can be tougher to spot. Take Caterpillar, the American heavy equipment manufacturer that got its start in 1886 building combine harvesters. You wouldn't think a company like this would have the background to make its own mobile phones, and you'd be right. This phone, the S22 Flip, was actually built by a British company called the Bullet Group, whom Cat licensed to make phones like this. In this case, the co-branding was executed thoughtfully. The rugged durability and industrial aesthetic dovetail perfectly with the Cat brand. So it's easy to imagine this device in the tool belt of someone who really does drive a Caterpillar for a living. But now watch, it gets really confusing. That same Bullet Group also makes phones under the Motorola brand. Yeah, the Motorola Defy 2 is made by an entirely different company than the one that builds the Moto G and Razr smartphones. Same deal with that Defy satellite link I saw at Mobile World Congress. It brandishes the Motorola Batwing brand, but it's built by Bullet. Now you might think that means Bullet is also behind all those police body cameras and two-way radios for the public sector, but nope. Those are made by another company called Motorola Solutions, entirely separate from the Motorola we know as a Lenovo company today. Phew.
Now, it's important to keep in mind, a licensed product is not necessarily shorthand for inferior product.
We'll use Motorola for another example. Several years ago, it licensed its brand to another company called eBuyNow in order to create the 2020 edition of the Moto 360 smartwatch. And that thing was actually a really good product, which I continued to wear long after my review. Elsewhere in the wearable world, the Citizen, Diesel, and Michael Kors brands are borne by smartwatches that are actually built by Fossil Group. And as my buddy David Kogan just told me, the famous Marshall audio brand was recently acquired by a company called Zound. But you better believe that famous Marshall wordmark ain't going anywhere. And let's come back to BlackBerry for a sec. Research in Motion was no stranger to licensing. Even as far back as 2000, it offered branded versions of its interactive 950 pager from Compaq and even America Online. See previous episode again. So when the company announced back in 2017 that it had teamed up with TCL to reboot the brand as BlackBerry Mobile, well, I was cautiously optimistic. With TCL building the hardware and BlackBerry adding features to the Android OS, the Key 2 actually ended up a pretty compelling phone for the kind of user who never got over giving up a QWERTY keyboard. Of course, it wasn't compelling enough because there's no Key 3, and in fact, no licensee ended up building another one after 2020. Even so, people today continue to associate the BlackBerry name with phones, even though today it's basically a cybersecurity company. Speaking of security, we're about to finish up with a brand that's even more misunderstood than BlackBerry. But first, join me for a word about keeping yourself secure online.
You probably already know that your personal information is being bought, sold, and traded online. And if you didn't, well, sorry to give you the bad news. In fact, this privacy problem is so huge that you might even think, why bother trying to address it? It's impossible. But it's not.
This video is sponsored by Delete Me, a simple subscription service that gives control of your personal data back to you. Just tell them who you are, and they go to work scrubbing your private information from the web. I'm talking current and past addresses, names of your family members, property and court records. In 7 days, you get a privacy report like this. Yep, this is my actual report. And just look at how many data brokers had my information. No wonder I get so many spam calls. Well, thanks to Delete Me, all these brokers are now removing my information. I didn't have to spend 10 hours doing it myself, and Delete Me will automatically repeat the process every 3 months. So take back control and delete your personal data from the web. Visit joindeleteme.com/MrMobile and use code MrMobile for 20% off. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. It was tough to pick a favorite device at Mobile World Congress 2023, but I had no trouble choosing my favorite booth at the show. After years of slogging away with the same low-key logo, Nokia debuted the new brand it had developed with consulting firm Lippincott, with a booth that literally was the logo. Now look, new brands are always polarizing, and I saw some good jokes in the wake of that relaunch. I think my favorite was the one that said the new insignia reminded them of a new type of yogurt. But I also saw many of the same reactions I saw to the BlackBerry news this week. People not getting that Nokia doesn't actually make phones anymore. So while I think most of my audience understands this, here's a wildly condensed timeline for those who are still confused. Back in the early 2010s, Microsoft was still trying to make Windows Phone happen. And as with Android today, Windows phones were being built by many different manufacturers. But Microsoft had a much closer partnership with Nokia than anyone else. So in 2013, the companies said, look, we already live together. We got the dog and the shared checking account. Let's just go down to City Hall and make it official. In other words, Microsoft bought Nokia's mobile phone business, but crucially, not the rest of the company. Nokia's other businesses, from cellular network equipment to data centers to mapping providers, Microsoft didn't buy any of that. And that's the Nokia that still exists today. A 5G B2B networking company with no consumer mobile products at all.
But wait, I hear you saying, then why can I still buy Android phones that say Nokia on the back? And by now you know the answer. Licensing.
See, among the things Nokia didn't sell to Microsoft were its patent portfolio and the right to its brand. So in 2016, Nokia licensed that brand to HMD Global, a Finnish company owned by a private equity fund run by a former Nokia executive. And in short order, the world was getting the Android-powered Nokia phones it had wanted for years. Or, thought it wanted, anyway. Notice that those phones, and presumably future HMD phones, will continue to bear the old Nokia logo. Because the whole point of the rebrand was to help the real Nokia distance itself from the mobile phones it used to be known for. According to reporting from The Verge and Nokia Mob, licensed products will continue to use the classic logo. Why does any of this matter? Well, in my view, you should know from which company you're buying something. After all, that's the same company you'll need to turn to for support, and if you're sharing user data with them, you better damn well know who they really are.
For what it's worth, I and any other reputable creator or reviewer will always strive to make it clear when we're covering a licensed product versus one from a self-owned brand.
Disclosure, this video contained footage of review samples from many manufacturers, but no company was offered editorial input or copy approval concerning same. If you have a question or a story about licensing or branding in the mobile tech world, leave a comment. And please subscribe to the Mr. Mobile for more mobile device reviews from today and yesterday, coming soon. Until next time, from Michael Fisher, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.